If you have been enjoying listening to the stories of entrepreneurs across Edinburgh, then why not subscribe? If you're on YouTube, you can hit the red button down below and hit the bell to get notifications. Or if you're listening on Spotify or Apple, then subscribe to the podcast. We hope you enjoy the show. Chris, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure.
So before we start, I thought it'd be quite good because like Nike, who there's much debate over the name and pronunciation of that business, we thought it'd probably be good to hear from yourself how you pronounce your own business's name.
Just to clear that up, Tiso.
Tiso.
Yeah.
Not Tiso. I lost.
There's no E, there's no Z.
Tiso.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, forgive me if I get it wrong. My whole life I've been saying
Oh, really?
Yeah. I've always said Tiso.
Oh, gosh. Right.
And like
okay.
Tiso for me is I'm getting a bit ahead of myself, but like that was where we went for lunch every Saturday to the Glasgow one. There was the ice wall and everything. Like,
Yeah, you're going back a bit now.
Yeah. Like
Showing your age.
That's like my childhood. Right. But anyway, tell us about Tiso.
Well, where would you like me to start?
Yeah, well, give us a snapshot of where it is right
beginning?
now. Well, right now, give us a snapshot, and then we'll jump back.
Okay, so right now, in I think quite an exciting place, we are coming off the back of a good year, which is always a nice place to start. And we've got some very exciting expansion and development plans programmed in for this year. So yeah, I'm in a good place.
And of course, now part of a larger PLC.
So that relationship started 12 years ago. The background to that, I suppose it depends how far back you want to go, but essentially we went from our best record year ever in 2010 to our worst year ever in 2011, which was pretty sobering and humbling experience. And what that brought about, or what that precipitated, was some essential restructuring. And that was a pretty painful, brutal process of surgery, and touched on all areas of the business, stores that had to close, people that had to be made redundant, and a variety of other measures. But there was obviously an element of financial restructuring to that. And anyway, we came through that painful and uncomfortable process. Scary experience too, actually, where you're living every day with that stress and pressure of business survival. And I was very clear that I wanted to recapitalize the business. I wanted to ensure that its future was secure, and that in an increasingly competitive market landscape where there was a lot of evidence of consolidation and refinancing of our competitors, I wanted to make sure that we were in the best possible place. And so we set about looking for the right appropriate investment on the right terms. We looked at a variety of different options, including private equity and venture capital, which for a number of reasons weren't the right fit. And in a kind of interesting and roundabout way, we were introduced to JD, who had not long since bought Blacks and Millets out of administration. So they'd already, I suppose, visibly demonstrated their interest and investment in outdoor as a space. And they were the right partner. So their first investment phase was 12 years ago, and it's been a very strong and happy partnership.
Brilliant. And so take us right back then to the start then. Tell us from wherever you want.
Well, the very start, I suppose, is with my parents coming together. They were brought together really by a shared love of the outdoors and of exploration. They both had good careers in their own professions. And they gave that up and took a big risk by giving up secure income and a career in order to throw what little they had together to start their own business. And I think there was 2 or 3 motivations, but the primary motivation was that they saw an opportunity. And because they were both very passionate, interested in the outdoors, the mountains, and expeditions, they saw that there was a shortage of good clothing and equipment readily available in Scotland at that time. And they recognized that through the frustration that was shared by their friends, the people that they were going into the mountains with and on these expeditions with. But they also, I think, harbored a desire to be their own boss. And I think perhaps slightly naively thought that by having their own business, that would give them more freedom and flexibility, not less. But that's quite romantic. And so that really brought brought about the creation of the business or the founding of the business.
So 1962 was when the first store was opened. So out of interest, where were they getting their kit prior to that then?
So it was mostly bought overseas or bought down south. So people in Scotland would travel down to London and buy often army surplus and then modify it. So they would get sleeping bags, they would get rucksacks, they would get boots, and then adapt it for mountain use as opposed to army or services use. And then also people that were going on trips, expeditions, either climbing or skiing to the Alps, where they were much more advanced with equipment development on the continent in the 50s and 60s. And so there was much more available, and people would buy it, stock up, and bring it back. And actually, when Tiso was founded, that really was how we were stocked in those early days, was by my parents taking their camper van and sometimes us as babies over to visit suppliers in Italy or Switzerland and loading up the back of the van and driving it back.
Wow, that's crazy. So they opened their first store then in Edinburgh?
So the first shop was trading, well, the first shop wasn't a shop. They were trading out the back of someone else's shop. It was a boat shop on Dundas Street. And their first own standalone premises were on Rodney Street. Yeah.
Okay.
And so, and obviously they had that romantic notion that they would get more time. Brilliant. I'm sure every business owner listening to this right now would say, absolutely, that's crazy thought, but a nice one, but not right. So what was life like then in the early stages then? I only know because I'm obviously young. I wasn't around in the 1960s. So anecdotally, joking apart, I think very tough. I think exciting for sure. And I know that they both were incredibly invested and passionate about the business from the very beginning, but at the same time, hugely stressful. And I think, funds were short, money was tight, and it was pretty hand to mouth. And I think the fact that it sort of coincided with the beginnings of a young family, anyone who's been through that knows that that's pretty all-consuming too. And so balancing the two was a real challenge. And the business was founded, to be clear, very much as a partnership. The only reason it bore my father's name above the door was because, he was a well-known and respected mountaineer of his generation in Scotland. So his name perhaps had more resonance within the Scottish mountain community than my mum's would have done. And really, the only reason he ended up taking the lead in the business for the first 20 or 30 years was because they had to kind of split responsibilities. So my mum was very much left with 3 boys, and my dad was focused on the business. Because you mentioned Glasgow, you remember your childhood, but I grew up in Bridgevale near Stirling, so I remember the Tiso store at the Thistle Centre as well. Which
was actually, I think, the first store we opened outside Edinburgh.
Oh, right, was it?
Yeah.
All right, so there's only one in Edinburgh, or
two in Edinburgh. So by then there would have been Leith and Rose Street, and I think I'm right in saying Stirling came before Buchanan Street.
Is it still there out of interest?
No.
Oh, right. Okay.
No, it isn't. And I think that's just a sort of a reflection of how consumer behaviour has changed and how the sort of provincial towns, not just in Scotland but across the UK, have been kind of compromised as people want to gravitate more towards bigger stores where there's more choice in the bigger population centres. And so we have actually very deliberately in recent years rationalised our estate into a smaller estate of larger format stores.
And just out of interest then, from how big was the estate by number at least?
I think probably we, in terms of absolute standalone units, probably peaked at 14, 15 stores.
Right, yeah.
Which we're kind of back up to now. Yes. But back then it was a larger estate all within Scotland with quite a lot of representation in those sort of smaller towns like Stirling or Ayr, where retail has really, I suppose, suffered the death of 1,000 cuts.
Yeah.
So what was your story then into the business? How did you end up?
Accidental. Well, not entirely accidental, but largely accidental. So I had come into the business. I I had attended university briefly on the south coast of England, and that had followed a period spent sailing, and shall we say, the course and I did not align. And so I came back to Edinburgh, somewhat unsure of what I wanted to do, but still young, still only 20 years old, and sort of fell into the family business really in the absence of any other gainful employment being presenting itself. And I'd only been in the business for a year when my father was killed tragically in an accident, and that sort of overnight propelled me into a leadership role, which I was very evidently ill prepared for, but hadn't planned or expected in any way, shape, or form. And yeah, it's just been a journey from there.
Yeah. So you're only 21 then when you took that position.
21.
Yeah, that's crazy. So like looking back now, like what was it like? Now you're saying, well, it was crazy to be in that position, but in the moment, do you remember it feeling chaos, and how did it feel?
No, curiously. And I think that's because you don't know what you don't know. And I think knowing what I know now with 30 plus years of accumulated leadership and retail experience, then I should have been terrified, but I wasn't. And I think also perhaps circumstantially, you're in the moment and you don't have a great deal of time or opportunity to think and plan too far ahead. But equally, you're so busy dealing with what is right in front of you, you don't have much opportunity to reflect either. And so you just have to get on with it.
Mm-hmm. And at that point, was your mum involved in the business still?
Yeah, so she'd never stopped being involved, but it had been sort of informal and slightly at arm's length. But she'd always taken a keen interest, and the talk around the dinner table, whether or not she had been in the office or not, was always about the business. And often, I guess, in the evenings, that's when my mum and dad would catch up about business and make the decisions that were going to define whatever was happening moving forward. But she came back in as our chairman for a number of years, actually. And given her history, given her knowledge, and sort of her invested passion, was a really helpful and wise counsel to have around.
Yeah. So you're now 22, 23, you've been in the role for a few years. What did you always plan to grow it, or how much was like legacy of the business continuing to grow and you were just like, right, okay, I guess I'm doing this? Or like how much of the vision and drive actually came from you at that point as someone who was like relatively young in the business leading it forward?
I think I'm naturally quite a restless and ambitious person, but there was I think a culture of growth and development well ingrained in the business by then. And that had very much stemmed from my father. And I think so that was his legacy in many ways. I think he'd really left that sort of indelible print of we've got to be moving forward and always looking for ways and opportunities to innovate. So I think that was already there. And I think combined with my sort of natural ambition, I think, that was always going to be the direction of travel. And I've thought a lot about how that kind of hangs together over the years. And I think it has to start with a vision. But then you have that vision, you have to then qualify that vision. You have to inform that vision. And so you look at your market and you start to try and identify and understand where there's opportunities to be competitive, but also opportunities to disrupt. And then that in turn leads you to sort of focus and define your own market positioning. And for us, our market positioning was largely informed by our DNA, which was a real commitment to performance and integrity and quality and so on. And then after that, it becomes about developing that compelling proposition. And then you need a team to deliver that compelling proposition, which it is often, I think, in many ways, the most challenging but the most rewarding part of the whole process. And then after that, it becomes about adapting and ensuring that you remain relevant and that in turn brings about the resilience, I suppose, the business resilience. And I've obviously left out all the financial modeling and funding and how you capitalize things, but because that's a bit dull, but very necessary, obviously.
Yeah. But age 23, I mean, that wouldn't have been as much on your radar, right? Like, you weren't thinking financial models and cash flow.
No.
You know, it was more like, I've got this new animal that I'm kind of trying to...
I wouldn't have known what a financial model was if it had slapped me in the face. But happily, there were some good people in the business already, and yeah, you have to trust and rely on those around you. And over the years, you know, I think probably, I would like to think that perhaps my greatest achievement in the business has been the creation of a world-class team. And that's something I'm really proud of too, actually.
It's interesting. You've used words kind of in the last little while about adapting, innovating, moving forward that your dad would say. And that's interesting. That's almost an attitude from the outdoors and adventure, I guess, but absolutely applies to business as well.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we recently held our annual conference, and I sort of closed it by emphasizing that not the importance. It's not about it being important. It's actually essential. Being able to adapt in order to remain relevant and to build in the resilience. And I really wanted the team to just take those three: adapt, remain relevant, and build resilience. Take that message away. And so that's never really changed. And I think there are parallels with the outdoors. There's parallels with expeditions, whether they're sailing expeditions or in the mountains, because you have to, in a business and on a mountain, you have to have a plan. You have to understand your landscape. You have to be able to navigate. You have to be able to change the plan. You have to assemble a strong team, and that team have to work well together, and there has to be a goal. So, I think there's probably a lot of parallels.
And as you look back at the growth of the business, obviously we've talked about JD, and that was a strategic investment. But it sounds like you started organically growing at the early stages, and then how did things unfold from there as you continued to grow? Yeah,
so within Tiso Group now there are multiple fascia. And how they came about it is quite interesting, because after I took over, we had really focused on organic growth for about the next decade. But along the way, with the launch of our outdoor experience concept, we'd brought together a number of retail partners. And we recognized that what we were very good at was the outdoor and mountain bit. We weren't specialists in bike. We weren't specialists in ski. And so we really needed partners that were, but that shared our kind of commitment to quality of service and technical performance. And we had by then a couple of great partners in Blue Ski and Alpine Bikes. And the acquisitions really were as a consequence of opportunities. So we'd been working together. We knew and understood these businesses. But at the point where the respective founders wanted to retire for whatever reason, it seemed like the most natural thing, not only because it gave us an opportunity to sort of ensure we protected what we had created by having control over what was going on in our buildings. But it was also, there was a strategic element, because as a business, we had historically been very, very stacked towards winter as a season, autumn, winter, and so very reliant on that season to deliver, which means that we were also a bit exposed. And I was keen to sort of de-risk the business, and as a consequence, having bike as a category gave us a much stronger spring-summer proposition, which meant that we were less reliant on having a hard winter. So there was a sort of a commercial consideration in there, as well as a sort of a trading consideration as well. And George Fisher, which is an iconic business in the Lake District, actually been around longer than Tiso. It was founded in the 50s. And a business like that only comes up for sale very occasionally.
And what did you, earlier on when we chatted, you described it as...
I suppose it's almost like the sort of the Selfridges or the Harrods or the Fortnum & Masons of outdoor. Right. It's a beautiful building, historic building in the heart of the Lake District, and it's just a really wonderful iconic store, and so we felt that it shared our values and our sort of market positioning and sort of commitment to quality. So there was a real synergy there, and yeah, the opportunity to take control of a fascia that would give us a platform for expansion into England was quite exciting too, because Tiso is really a quintessentially Scottish business, and doesn't have the profile or the reputation south of the border.
Yeah, and on the timeline in your website, I think 2018 you opened up Aviemore, and it said it was a long. Is that right? Am I right in saying that?
I'll take your word for it.
It was a long-held ambition to open that particular location and that format. So what was why was that so important?
So, look, Aviemore, in the heart of the Spey Valley, it's, I suppose, the adventure capital of Scotland.
Yeah.
If you want to go biking, skiing, you've got the Cairngorms right there. You've got some fantastic lochs, rivers. It's very accessible. And as a consequence, it's an outdoor mecca in Scotland. It's a real destination. It's maybe not quite got the glamour of Chamonix, but it kind of, to me, it's the closest equivalent we've got. And so we'd always harbored an ambition to be there, and the only thing that had held us back was the absence of any space that would give us the scale to do what we do in order to be market disruptive. And I wasn't really interested in opening a small high street store. We by then were deeply invested and committed to our outdoor experience concept. All our sort of focus and commitment and investment had gone into growing that concept, that the proven formula, and it requires space. And there simply wasn't any space available up until the retail park that was built on the site. So, yeah, that's what created that opportunity. And I would have loved to have been there many years earlier, but we just had to wait for the right unit to become available.
Yeah,
and then we didn't hesitate, and been no looking back, because I think it's not only been very challenged in terms of the market, but I think it's also grown the market quite substantially, because in terms of proposition, it goes above and beyond anything that's already there.
Yeah. Interesting. You said, and we didn't hesitate as well. How quick a decision maker are you when it comes to kind of big business decisions?
I think you'd need to ask my team what they think, but I'm pretty decisive, and I tend to make up my mind quite quickly about things. That isn't to say that I'm sort of reckless or cavalier, because I do like to be in possession of really accurate data and all the facts, and properly stress test, the modeling for any sensitivities, and kick the tires pretty vigorously and rigorously. But at the same time, I've also learned to trust my instincts about things, and you have to kind of combine the two, don't you? It's head and heart, and get that working. And I think you make decisions that you have confidence in, and you have to back yourself. And yeah, I'm okay with that. Yeah.
And I guess looking back as well at some of the other things that you're involved in outside of the business, I guess formally, we obviously both Alex and I know Craig Matheson at the Polar Academy as well. Can you tell us a little bit more about how that all came about?
Oh, so that's a great story. Yeah. So we are very committed to supporting expeditions, particularly Scottish expeditions, obviously. And that's something we've done. My parents did that right from the very beginning. They were always keen to support either young Scottish mountaineers or climbers going off and doing interesting things, not just in Scotland, but further afield too. And so that's always been part of our DNA, is to support exciting new projects. And I get a lot of approaches. As a business, there's a lot of people coming looking for help with gear or financing of expeditions, and occasionally someone walks through the door who just stands out. And Craig came to me 20 plus years ago, and very softly spoken, considered, and he was working as an accountant at the time, and he started talking with great knowledge and passion about Arctic and Antarctic expeditioning and exploration. And it was quite evident that, he was very well researched, but also that this, came from somewhere pretty deep. And he had this dream to put together the Scott 100 expedition and be part of a group that would go to the South Pole, ski to the South Pole, and be the first sort of Scottish contingent to do so for a long time. And I immediately warmed to him. We connected, and there was a sort of quiet, understated steeliness about him, which I think just stood out. And I just thought, you're going to bloody do this. I just have, it's just, I get that feeling. And anyway, so off he went, and he came back, having successfully completed the expedition. And we were, as part of the sort of the sponsorship and the support that we gave him, along with a couple of other companies, he was doing a series of lectures. And through a series of talks, which included in schools, he happened upon someone, a lad who wasn't in a very good place at the time, and he felt he could help this boy. And anyway, fast forward, he and this boy trained and ended up going on an expedition to the North Pole together, which was life-changing for them both in different ways. And coming off the back of that, Craig and I were talking. We'd become by then firm friends, and I think I was something of a confidant and counsel to him in terms of mapping out where he would go next. And he had this idea of trying to scale up, essentially, the positive impact and experience of the training and the going on this expedition that it had for this boy, scaling that up so that it would have a wider impact on a greater number of young people. And out of that, really, the Polar Academy was born. And so we kind of conceived it actually on a napkin over dinner in the Shore Bar in Leith. He's still got the napkin. And Tiso were the sort of the charter founding partner, if you will. And yeah, delighted that we are still as committed and invested. I'm on the board, and Craig's a great mate, and the Polar Academy is the principal charity partner of Tiso. So it's a really important and special relationship.
Have you been?
Have I been where?
To the South Pole?
No, I haven't been to the South Pole. I've been to Antarctica.
Okay.
I sailed to Antarctica. I've never harbored any inclination to ski endlessly across a frozen, icy wasteland to get to the South Pole. That's not doesn't hold any appeal to me. But funnily enough, there's another interesting little kind of connection. Craig actually narrated a film that I made from an expedition that I led to Antarctica and South Georgia. And that in itself, it's funny how that came about, because I'd found myself, I'm sorry, I'm going a wee bit off piste here. Is that all right?
Yeah,
absolutely fine.
All right. So this all starts, incidentally, with a brain hemorrhage, right? So I had a massive subarachnoid cerebral aneurysm in 1999. Massive brain hemorrhage, ended up in hospital, nearly died, very lucky to be here, and all of that. Before that happened, I had already accepted an invitation to be part of the British Everest Expedition 2000. And against the surgeon's advice, despite having had the brain hemorrhage, I decided to go ahead and join the expedition. And so off we went. And in the year 2000, we became the first Scottish team the first team to summit from the south side, and put 3 out of 5 of the climbing team on the summit, one of whom was Polly Murray, who became the first Scottish woman to summit Everest ever, for which she has probably not really ever received the recognition that she fully deserves. But anyway, Polly and I had been thrown together on that expedition. We came back. I think you go on an expedition for a couple of months on a mountain like Everest, and if you go as strangers, you either come back never wanting to see the person again, or you come back as lifelong friends. And Polly and I came back the latter, and she remains an ambassador for Tiso, and my son's godmum, and we're very close. Anyway, whilst we were on Everest,
Whilst we were on Everest.
Yes. So,
Just very casual.
Well, you've got to fill time. So, if there's bad weather or whatever. So we're sitting at base camp, and we were all chatting about what other expeditions, what would be our dream trips to do. And for most of the team, it was go off and climb this mountain, go off and climb that mountain. And for me, it wasn't. And I said, well, actually, really, I'm more of a sailor than a mountaineer, the truth be told. And actually, mine would be much more about a sailing expedition, but also a bit more multidisciplined, because I get a bit bored, and actually that's the thing about a big mountain, you're living and sleeping and eating and breathing that to the exclusion of anything else for days and weeks. And that's quite mentally challenging. So I quite like a bit more stimulation. So anyway, they said, oh, what would you want to do? And I said, well, Shackleton's a great hero of mine. This was long before Shackleton became anything like as fashionable as he is now. Seems to feature in every sort of inspirational presentation that anyone ever makes now. But anyway, he was a bit less recognized then. And I said, well, I would really like to, as a sailor, tick a few kind of bucket list items, which is sail from down the Beagle Channel, round Cape Horn, across the Drake Passage, go and pay a sort of pilgrimage, if you will, to Elephant Island, where Shackleton's men were left kind of semi-abandoned whilst he went off to get help, and then sail across the Weddell Sea and up to South Georgia, and then spend a bit of time in South Georgia, climbing, ski touring, a bit of diving on old whaling wrecks, and then sail back across against the prevailing wind and current across the Southern Ocean, south of the Falklands, and back up the Beagle Channel. And they said, well, that sounds great. And how do you propose doing that? And I said, well, if I was going to do it, I would really want to do it with my sort of sailing hero, a guy called Skip Novak, with his custom-built steel yacht that he keeps down there. And they said, well, why don't you get in touch with him and see if he'd be interested? And I don't know, I was a bit overwhelmed. You just don't think of dropping an email to your childhood hero, do you? Anyway, so I did. So I emailed Skip but via satellite from Everest and said, look, I've got this idea. What do you think? And he said, sounds really exciting. Why don't we meet up in London when you get back and talk about it? Meanwhile, good luck on Everest, come back alive. And so we met up, and talking of drawing things on napkins, he drew, we met in the Bluebird in London, and he drew this amazing map, like a chart, if you like, on the tablecloth of the Southern Ocean, and sort of mapped out the routes. And stupidly, I didn't keep it. Which anyway, that's life's too short for regrets. But anyway, where was this going? Where was this from? I can't remember.
Filming the Antarctic.
It was Craig. Yes. Yeah. Anyway, so we came back and we made a film off the trip, which wasn't very good, actually.
What, the film or the trip?
No, the film. It was amazing. The film was rubbish. But anyway, Craig narrated the film for us. Which was a nice kind of little anecdote for you.
Great.
Yeah, wow. So you're very hot on this outdoor experience thing. You've done some incredible things. I guess I'm intrigued by the outdoor experience that like my childhood has of Tiso, of going there and they had the climbing wall. It was never open. Do you know what I mean? I'd always go in. I don't know whether it was my mum telling me it wasn't open, but I'd be like, oh, can we go up the climbing wall? Because there was one in there and you see people, and then you had the ice wall, and then you had the cafes, and you had, how much of that was a business decision about pulling people in and giving them like a real experience inside to try and take that? Do you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Entirely considered and deliberate. And the intention, it goes back to this piece around innovation, right? And it was pretty clear to us that our market was getting more and more crowded, but the consumer was also becoming more and more discerning. And how do you differentiate yourself? How do you stand out from the crowd? How do you give more people and new people a reason to visit and increase dwell times and so on? And so it's about market disruption, isn't it? And we wanted to, if your competitors have largely got access to the same space and the same brands, then you have to find new and different ways of doing things. And it was actually one of my late brothers who really deserves the credit for the outdoor experience concept, because he was the one that kind of first thought it would be quite cool to bring together these different elements. And then we kind of took that from the conceptual stage and kind of defined it and refined it and distilled it into what it is today. But yeah, it was all about appealing exactly to you and your family. People like you would actually end up pestering mum to go and visit that shop. How many other shops as a child would you pester your mum to go and visit? Probably not very many.
Yeah.
And so I think you've just confirmed that we got it right.
There you go.
Yeah, there we are.
And within then the context of the JD scenario that you're now part of, how much freedom do you have to innovate? Are you carte blanche, go crack on and do it your way?
There's obviously benefits. There's more benefits than not of being part of a phenomenal global PLC, and they have, as I say, been a source of huge support and investment in our business, and pretty much supported every initiative that I have had over the course of the last 12 years. So
do you really feel that you picked the right one?
I can't complain.
Yeah.
I can't think of any occasion where we have provided a compelling argument for wanting to do something and they have not been on board. And we're into a new sort of exciting phase, because alongside my CEO of Tiso role, I've been asked to lead the specialist outdoor division, which sort of sits within the umbrella of JD Outdoor, which in itself is really exciting, because it's about looking for opportunities and synergies across the different specialist businesses that sit within the outdoor division.
And can I just ask, how have you made the kind of the leap? Because culturally, I guess, kind of from a smaller family business where things can be a lot more nimble into a bigger corporate. How have you found that transition personally?
I think it's about adapting. You have to recognize that which you're not willing to compromise on, and that which you have no choice but to compromise on. We're a very, very small part of a very, very large organization. But that large organization understands and values our DNA and the position that we occupy in the market. And that's really important. And, it was always very, very clear to me that we had to preserve that family business culture. Our values are up physically up on the wall in our office. They're a visual reminder and stimulation every single day. And those haven't changed, and those aren't going to change. That's the defining DNA of the business. So, from my point of view, we haven't lost any of that. And, I still embody and embrace that. And it's really super important to us. And it largely informs pretty much every decision we make. It's interesting, you're asking about decisions earlier. And I think if you've got a really clear understanding of who you are and what your values are and what you stand for, it actually makes the big decisions quite easy to make, because all you have to do is sense check whatever that decision is against those values, against those principles, against that DNA, and that will quickly tell you whether it's the right or wrong thing to do.
Yeah.
Wow.
Very good.
We ask every guest, what is your guiding principle in business?
I think just to be authentic. I think if you're authentic, you can't go far wrong. Again, I think that defines who we are. I think people have grown up to really like, respect, admire that about us as a business. It's the integrity of your reputation is built on that authenticity, isn't it? And so you have to embrace that on a personal level as well. And if you want to engender and foster real loyalty and energy and enthusiasm within your team, then there has to be an authenticity that runs through everything.
It's interesting you say authentic, because actually you demonstrated that authenticity within probably 30 seconds of arriving here in this studio.
By admitting that I neither listened to podcasts nor had any idea about what I was letting myself in for today.
And how has it been for you?
It's been great, and I only
You've
wish,
adapted well.
I adapted well, and I only wish that I had done as much diligence as you have.
Chris, thank you so much for coming on, sharing your story, and we wish you good luck in the future.
Thank you very much. It's
Thank
been a pleasure.
Thanks.